right. Hello, hello. Welcome. We are here with our July episode of Scripting the Book. As you popped in that seat just in time.
There was a water spill that I was not calculating in my quick grab of helping my son.
Oh my goodness. So this month we are midsummer and we have chosen to read and watch Misery by Stephen King. So we're gonna hop into this one. You guys in the chat, if you're watching us live, you can go ahead and let us know what you thought of it. We're going to talk about the book. No spoilers first, just in case anybody's popping in and they're thinking, should I read this book? And then after we talk about the book itself with no spoilers, we'll start getting spoilery once we get into the movie, and then full spoilers towards the end. So that's how you know how this is going to roll along. So if wherever you are on the spoilerish level, that is where you can hop in and join us. Um, we are going to let my fabulous co-hosts and friends introduce themselves, starting with Natalie, and we'll swing it on back around to me.
I'm Natalie Locke, who's horrible at promoting herself, so I'm reaching over to the side to grab stuff. I'm co-author of 1,000 Words to Get Started and 1,000 Words to Ignite Romance. I'm kind of noticing a theme of genres, directing the writing prompt books. I did that with my my co-author Chandra Arthur. I was about to call her sister from another mister and stuff, and I'm like 20 naming conventions because we're cut from the same cloth half the time. Even though she writes way darker stuff than I do, like she kills off people, and whereas mine, you think somebody died and then it just is a happy misunderstanding at the end. um yeah, and you can find me usually once a month streaming, uh, either on Chandra's channel or mine, doing a live uh, prompt writing and feedback. So, yeah, I'm really excited for Misery, and I'm loving where the chat's going right now. Sorry, Ben.
Yeah. Sorry, Ben. Ben, speaking of.
Hey everyone, I am Ben Pick. You can find me Monday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern Time as Running2Write, and I host productivity sprints. I've kind of dropped the whole questionable writing advice through running metaphors thing for the near future as I am finishing up my 4th novel. I'm like 2 or 3 chapters from the end, but I'm also going to go back and then use those productivity sprints to churn out the edits. So that's the plan for that. But yeah, if you are free on Monday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, you can come say hi, join in, do whatever, and be productive on debatably the worst night of the week.
Yes. And you're here on my channel. I'm Nia, the Vixen of Fiction, all over the internet. I stream, I'll be back to streaming productivity sprints at the end of this month, Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. You'll also be able to start catching me over on Twitch on Mondays and Fridays in the middle of the day. And for the time being, every other Monday, we're doing a study session. We're taking Brandon Sanderson's writing course. It's his creative writing course that he gives at BYU. So if you'd like to join us for those, you can do that. So we take the course and then we do a allegedly short discussion afterwards. They've been like hour-long discussions afterwards. So if you're interested in that, that's just until we're done with the courses. So I think we have 6 or 7 more to go, and that's every other Monday. So that's me. I also write things. I write under NB James. If you're interested in cozy fantasy romance, it's contemporary. So it's a little bit of romance, a little bit of magic. When I have a little bit of fun with it. So that is me. Now we are going to dive into Misery. Before we do our likes and dislikes, who's the first time reading this? This is my first time reading it. All right, so we're all first time readers. All right, let's go over to my banners and we'll see what we think. All right. We're going to go down the list. Did anybody dislike it? Neutral on it? like on it, or was that a neutral or a like or in between, Ben?
Neutral.
Neutral. Okay. I'm a like on it. Natalie, like love? Is that like love? Gotcha. All right. So, Ben, who do we want to start with? Natalie, you're our highest rated. So, we want to start with you and then we'll
I think the book, to me, is just all about a psychological analysis of trauma and such, and I felt it delved into that very well. Like, even having PTSD while you're still in the trauma and causing the damage, being in the mind of Paul, like, and how he like hated himself, but he was also trying to survive and stuff. Like, it was, I thought that was a great delve into. And I should have looked it up, but I really wanted to find out what inspired Stephen King to write this, because we know The Shining was written because he stayed in the hotel that inspired it and everything, and so I'm just wondering where this one came from. And Carrie was inspired by one of a quiet students that he had when he was a teacher. So
yeah, I wonder if this is because he says it's his number one fan is in the book. I wonder if this is his like number one nightmare as a writer. So I enjoyed what I wasn't expecting was actually getting the Misery story, like the story within the story. So he's writing this book. I'm going to set up the premise without spoilers. I think this is pretty much what you can find if you're just looking it up, is that there's an author. His name is Paul. He ends up a captive of Annie, who pretty much puts him through the ringer for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it gets pretty gruesome. So I like the way I enjoyed his writing style in this. You're pretty much in Paul's head most of the time. So even when it's Annie from Paul's point of view. And I so the storytelling aspect of it, I think he did a really good job with it. It is creepier than I expected as someone who's seen the movie. This was worse. So it was never going to be a love for me because I will probably never read it again. But it was fascinating and I thought really decently written. Like, the writing style, I felt like Paul was telling me what's going on. So that was all good. Like, literally what keeps it from, well, I don't know. No, it was solidly alike. There are parts of it. There are two scenes in particular that are in this book that unfortunately live rent free in my head. I will never get them out of my mind, and I'm very sad about that. They need to go. There's two that I'm just like, oh no, this is the worst. So now, Ben, what are your thoughts?
I think that a lot of the things that you put down as a strength I didn't like. This is very, very Stephen King, so it is very lengthy and verbose with its language. The two scenes that you were cringe worthy, we haven't discussed what they are, but I'm fairly certain that those are the ones that like I really did like, because it's, you know, this really strong horror and frankly Saw-like aspect to it, where it's kind of torture for the sake of being torture, and I enjoyed those moments because they felt well earned. But this book is a book and a half, where we get like half of Misery included in it, but I didn't really care about. Sorry, Misery is the book.
The book I think we can say
Misery is the character
in the book.
Yes.
That Paul had created and was trying to deviate from that storyline. He had been writing a series.
Yeah.
Right.
Paul, the character, had been writing a series. So.
Paul's ready to write a new stuff. He's done. He's been writing Misery for years, and he's done writing Misery. And all all of this is the fallout, accidentally the fallout from what he does with this character. And Misery is also the pig. Yes.
Yes. And so Paul is a perfect stand-in for Stephen King if he were in his nightmare scenario and basically just forced to write a book. And so we get like this whole thriller aspect to it, but then we also get parts of the book too, which I didn't. We'll get into it later. But this was a book and a half. I felt like it was very, very long, longer than it needed to be. It took a while to get going, as all Stephen King novels do. But I felt that this one just took a while to get where it was trying to go. And it does have some great moments. It does have some really tense scenes and wonderful thriller story beats. And it's fun to be inside of Paul's head. I didn't like the fake out jump scare. So there's a lot of times where he's like picturing the worst case scenario and you can tell that it's a hallucination more or less. Mm-hmm. And that just killed all sense of tension for me for those scenes. So like he would have this really, really great tense moment. And then I'd just be like, oh, this is a dream. Oh, this is, this and the other thing. And then that would just drop it down until like the next moment where like things actually happen in the story.
Yeah. I'm going to say a couple of things. I agree that it is wordy. When I first started reading it, I'm like, if we're starting here in the book, how is it this thick from where we're starting at, right? Mm-hmm. And it is wordy, but I'm thinking that that's part of Stephen King's writing. I haven't read a lot.
It absolutely is, and
I actually thought it was less wordy than Pet Sematary. Like
I thought so too.
I felt there was more importance. Mm-hmm. in the story, and I actually enjoyed hearing Misery's story because it's one of my pet peeves when there's a story within a story and we never hear the inner story. Sure. Like it's like I'm a writer and this is so great and I'm like, what is it?
And that's completely fair. I mean, it worked for you, so that's good. Yeah.
This I would say I was the market for this because there was actually nothing that I didn't like about it. I would say from what I understand y'all's points, but I actually enjoyed it kept me guessing, and especially when it came to the beats of like the entire scene, and I thought it was beautiful of the you cheated like with trying to not kill Misery and stuff, and I thought that was so true because I've dealt with that myself where I'm like, what? Refer to the source material, man, before you go forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I liked a lot of what he said about Paul's writing style, because I think Paul's writing style is actually in some ways different because Paul kind of outlines, he says that he knows the ending, but that the ending can change, where I think, isn't Stephen King just straightforward a pantser?
Yeah.
Kind of. So it was interesting that he kind of like put himself in the mind of someone who might, semi outline or know where the story's going, but leaves open for that ending to change, which is somewhere more where a lot of us fall. I think all of us fall somewhere in that range where we completely pants it or we outline it to a T and nothing can change. And we're all somewhere in there. And I teeter towards, so it was interesting to me that he wrote Paul that way. So there were parts of it that I was interested in just hearing the kind of the writing process. And definitely I'm always interested in the story within the story. I'm like, give me more story. But then I was like, oh, that's a lot of what this is. Like a lot of the last chapter, there's whole chapters where it's literally just, what he's been writing for Misery. So I was like, oh, okay, this is how we're doing this. So
I'll go into detail later, but I do want to know, one, Stephen King has said he doesn't write stuff down yet. This story, he had a dream on an airplane and I wrote it down on a cocktail napkin, wrote like the main ideas and stuff, and then expanded upon it later. So just throwing that out there. And there's actually more that inspired it, but that was the big tidbit that I quickly read.
Yes, the typewriter becomes its own character. I agree. We'll talk more about that when we get into spoilers. Does anybody want to try to say anything else about the book without putting out too many spoilers? Would you recommend? I'm like, I feel like if you want to tiptoe into this type of genre, into like the thriller, with a little bit of horror, you're like, it's not my jam, I don't know, this is probably a good one to do it. This is probably, as because I already can tell you that as far as movies go, this style and a couple of other Stephen King style, that have been done into movies, I really enjoyed. And then there's others where I'm like, absolutely not, don't like it at all, either because it's just too weird or too gross or too scary. So this falls somewhere where it's not too much, but it was definitely thrilling and definitely kept me like, oh my god, it did the job. So if you're that person wanting to like dive into something that might be more on the thrillerish side of Stephen King, this might be something I think that would work for you. I was interested the whole way through. And if you don't like the story within the story, you might be able to skip it, because if you want to skip those parts, but I thought they were interesting. That's me and Natalie, I think.
Yeah, I actually found it interesting because to me it was almost like a nonfiction, like here's how you write a story.
Yeah.
Teaching a little bit, and I enjoy that.
And it is cool how the beats within the story match up with the beats within the story too. So it was very interesting that way.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the book before we move on to the movie? And then after that, we'll be all spoilers. So if you guys want to know everything that we're talking about the book, we'll talk about that towards the end. So
for anyone who likes audiobooks, I will say the audiobook, I felt it. It was like someone who was imitating Kathy Bates.
Oh, I thought that too. When I first put it on, I literally had to look and see, but I'm like, wait, that's not her, right?
Yeah,
it wasn't
but
her.
it was almost like those audio plays a little bit, like the cadence of the speech, the fluctuation of the voice and stuff like that. Like there was anger, there was sheepishness, it wasn't just a dry reading. Yeah. So I'll just throw that out if anybody wants to go for the audiobook. I got it done in like 5 days. I just looked it up. See.
Yeah, I think between reading it, I think I also had it because I use Everand, so I had both the audio and the in case I went somewhere. I was like, but I think I only had to read it on my phone one time, so I was able to get it on all three. And yeah, I think I did it in 3 days this past week, so it was not bad, and just dotting it in and out whenever I could. Not one that I would want to go to sleep on, because I think the first day I went to sleep and something really weird and that happened, and I was like, maybe if it's because how it's going to get worse. I was like, maybe I'll just read this one in the middle of the day just in case, and I'm glad I did, because there was a couple scenes that had I read those before bed, those would have been what I was streaming about. There's just a couple scenes that are like, wow, okay. So let's go ahead and get into the movie. Thoughts on Netflix movie. We're going to do our dislike. Okay. Neutral. Like.
Well, neutral like.
Neutral like. Okay. Like love. Okay, so like love. So like, neutral like, and like love. All right, Ben, we're going to start with you. Where do we go wrong?
Sorry, I'm copying down all of your ratings. Yeah. So I enjoyed it for what it was. I was very surprised at how well it was done, because it's basically, for the most part, it is 2 actors and sometimes even just 1 actor for most of the scenes going through. And it is an hour 45 minutes, I think. So it's pretty lengthy for there to just be like only 2, for the most part, only 2 characters driving a lot of the story. And I was just impressed at how well it was acted. I mean, Kathy Bates, James Caan, they were fantastic in what they were given. And there were suspenseful moments, but the jump scares from the story, like I feel like it streamlined a lot of the book in a way that I enjoyed. So it doesn't have the like I said, the hallucinations, the dream sequences. It doesn't have those, so it takes those out, and we can watch him writing the story without having to show us what's happening with Misery at the same time. And I really, really enjoyed that. I think a couple of moments were a little bit lesser, where we can go into spoilers, but we really get with the book, we really get to understand who Kathy Bates is, who Annie Wilkes' character really is. And with the movie, we don't get as good of a view of who she is. And the book has a couple of really smart moments where it shows how, yes, she seems like a bit naive and a bit not as intelligent as Paul is in terms of, you know, worldly experience, but it's got a few moments where she really shines through in terms of how she tricks him and how she is able to always have the upper hand in the situation. So I don't know how they could have really included that in the movie, where I think it really did a wonderful job in the book for conveying that.
Yeah. I saw this movie, of course, when it first came out. It was probably at the time. No, there's one other movie, but I don't remember which one I saw first. There's one other movie that's Stephen King that I also really like. So, but it has a totally different feel. But this was when I was like, oh, I do like something of Stephen King's, because before that it had been like It and
Pet Sematary.
Pet Cemetery, and I'm like, those were absolute no's. And then what was it, like Cujo, you know, those ones, and I'm just like, those are all no's for me. And so this one and one other thing that he's done that I was like, okay. So this was scary enough for me. This is what made me realize I really don't like jump scares, because it does have the jump scare, but this is where I learned that it gets really, really quiet first. And then like the lightning scene where he like just closes his eyes for a second and opens them, and she's there right when I'm like, okay, all right. But this one, I think this might have been that year one of my top movies. I was like, what is going on? And I don't usually like this type of, like I said, not my genre, but this one I was like, I enjoyed this. Your initial thoughts on
I would
the
say
movie?
this film, like, we've had fanatics when it comes to famous people before, but this film kind of like brought it into the limelight and almost made it where it became a story anytime a celebrity was stalked or like just creepiness. Like, the first thing that pops in my head is the person that went into Sandra Bullock's house and she's on 911.
Yes.
And stuff like that, type of stuff. Like, I feel like this story helped push that into the limelight and be a little more considerate of the private lives of celebrities.
Yeah.
Even though, like, most of the time writers, they can be a little more private than actors and actresses and stuff. But regarding to kick it off, I'll go into the casting and stuff. Kathy Bates, she won an Academy Award for this. I mean, that says it all right there. She portrayed one of the most iconic villains in the world and in history, because it's someone that can be your next door neighbor. Like, and just, I will say just the movie, she didn't have that. She seemed more self-isolated versus the community isolating her. Like, it was more of a choice in the movie. And James Caan, I thought, was perfect and stuff. But one of the things that I find interesting, so here's a little fact. So Kathy Bates, she won an Academy Award for it. Apparently she had a very critical mother, and there's a lot of trauma there, because like 30 years later she's having an interview Yeah. Okay. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
But
I
for anyone
know.
who hasn't seen this, so
Oh
hopefully
my
we can
gosh, I
find the
almost
link
wanted to
and put it
cry
in
when I
chat.
heard that. Oh my
But
god.
like it was like 30 years later, she's having an interview with a newscaster, and where she's talking about, yeah, I never thanked my mother and stuff like that. And that in the Academy award speech as she's accepting it, turns out they played it for her, and she's like, why did I think that I never did? And just the realization of the gaslighting that
Yeah.
she endured for years of never being, because the quote her mom said was, well, you didn't cure cancer, or something
Yeah.
like that. Was, I mean, it just is, it makes Annie Wilkes seem not as scary
Yeah.
when you compare it to a gaslighting mother. But it almost, and
That
it almost,
yeah, years later, if you want, if you ever, you could just see it on her face. They're like, you did.
yes,
She's like, I never thanked my mother, because her mother told her that she didn't thank her and just totally just dismissed all of her
her
accomplishments.
achievements. Yeah.
And she believed it. She never went back and watched because she felt like, oh my gosh, that's
Well,
so
and also
embarrassing.
we
I
didn't
never
have
want to
YouTube
even
and
see it again.
stuff. We didn't have
Mhm.
YouTube and stuff. And when it came around, she didn't think, oh, I'm going to go fact check my mom
Yeah.
when things
No,
came
thank
around
God.
in like the early 2000s.
Yep. And I will say, so casting, I think I'd seen James Caan in things before, so I knew
I
he.
remember him more from Elf, but
Yeah.
I know he's more famous than Elf.
Yes. But this was, I feel like this is the first thing that I think Kathy Bates had done like TV spots and things like that before, but this is the first thing that I saw Kathy Bates in that I was like, whoa. And I'm an immediate fan. I'm like, anything she's in, I'm gonna watch it. She was, so I really liked it. Now, when upon rewatching, it does feel dated in a way, but it also still felt like if you were telling a story from the 80s. So I felt like it was fine. But Kathy Bates is really what sold it for me. That I really, really liked this. Again, it's never going to be a love for me because I didn't even know that you couldn't watch it unless you buy it, because it's one of those things. I remember it. Don't need to see it again because just the hobbling of the feet. No, no. It's like one of those for me. It's not my genre, but I really enjoyed the experience of seeing this movie.
And the
So
fun thing is that hobbling the feet is much lighter than what happens in the book, and the book goes into some really graphic details.
yes, we're gonna get into that in just a few minutes because yes, oh my goodness, whew, the book compared to the movie. So, and at the time, I'm thinking this is intense. I'm thinking that this is what he wrote, right? That man, what he, I don't know how he comes up with the stuff that he comes up with, but he did. So bringing the two characters, really, what the movie does is brings the two characters. There's a third character, the typewriter in the book, and it's a little bit more subtle in the movie, but when you see it after reading the book, you can't not see the typewriter with the smiley face. So there's the character of the typewriter, there's the character of the pig, and in the movie there's the sheriff, and you're kind of rooting for the sheriff the whole time. Sadness. um you're rooting for the sheriff, you're to find him. And I think
Yeah,
that's,
because you
and
get to see
his
his
publicist.
interaction with his wife, like, and see
Yes,
their
so fun.
dynamic and everything.
It's
And
so fun.
yeah,
They
which,
are a duo.
not quite a spoiler, but I do love the scene where she's on the phone. She's like, I don't know where he is. He's probably having an affair or something. And then he walks in and she goes, oh, well, here's Bob. He wants to know who you're having an affair with. Like, just that deadpan,
Yeah.
like joking around. And I thought that was adorable. It kind of showed into their relationship and stuff.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and do full spoilers, guys. I hope you're all ready. Let's go ahead and just go ahead and go for it and compare. So I enjoyed seeing that duo. You don't get any of that in the book. So they're added characters, but they work because otherwise it is literally just Kathy Bates and James Caan, which
You're
is
on the
still 90.
phone.
It's still
That's
yeah,
it.
it's still 90% just them, and it works. They do a really good job of drawing you in. Anybody else want to talk about the cast members? Any of the other cast members? How they worked for you guys? Because we got the setting and all that good
I
stuff.
thought the setting was good, and everything, especially showing the passage of time with like snow on the ground, the no snow and stuff. I am glad they didn't put certain things in. We'll talk about that and changes later. But I felt it did very nicely. I yeah, I thought it was very well done. And if the only thing is that if you it could actually still be set in today, because there is people out there who don't have cell phones and such. So I feel like it still holds a little bit of timelessness to it. And there is still people who have like the thinking of no cursing and an odd way of speaking when they're upset, as and such. Like, it's certain things, aspects are believable to still exist. But setting wise, yeah, like, I mean,
it's great setting. Colorado.
It had to be a remote farm, and that was done. Check.
Yep. Snow on the ground, making the isolation feel even more isolated works.
I would say the front windows are iconic. Like, even though I had only seen glimpses of the movie while I was reading the book, I had the picture of the bay windows the whole time when it came to him looking out. And so I think that it correlated well, what enhances that the setting was spot on.
All right, let's talk about the changes. We can talk about changes in general, and then we can let everybody know what our favorite or least favorite changes were. So I think Ben alluded to this earlier. This is condensed down. There's a lot of trauma that happens, and it's not easy to let the viewer know what's going on in the mind of the person who's being tortured. So we lose a lot of that, and you don't notice it when you're watching the movie until you read the book. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't miss it when I first watched the movie, and I only noticed it when I rewatched the movie to freshen up on it, that that's probably what she was thinking, and things like that, especially with Kathy Bates' character Annie, because Annie is going through a lot of psychological stuff, and Paul is able to tell us because he's like, I researched this for a character. So he's like, I can see her going through these motions. She goes through manic depressive stages where she starts injuring himself. And because he's done research, he's like, oh no, if she's binge eating and self-harming and things like that, trigger warning, guys, it is Misery and it is Stephen King, but yeah, trigger warning for Annie's got some issues. Okay, they're very serious.
And there is more than what was in the movie. Like, yes. Everyone thinks of the hammer and the legs. No, there's more.
Yes. So we're just gonna let you guys know that right now. If you're watching, I think if you're aware of some of the things that Stephen King writes about. But yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about it without doing too much detail, but we are spoiling at this point. So she's doing things, and he's able to relate to us what's going on in his mind when he's seeing the things that she's doing. So a lot of that's not in the movie. We can assume that she's going through some psychological things from watching the movie, but we don't we don't get the details that he's put in the book. As we're trying to watch it. I see you grinning. I want to go to the comments too.
You just gave the understatement of the century. It's fine.
But also, this came out in the 1990. So if they did even like more than what they did now, it would have gone from rated R to rated like MA or X or whatever.
NC-17 type thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
For the graphics. And honestly, like I think I said before, I thought the hobbling of the legs was bad. She takes an axe to his. Okay, spoilers. I'm telling you, we're warning you, full spoilers.
I keep on thinking about the mower.
The mower is the one. I was like, it can't get worse than this. Like twice with the axe on one leg. But then there's
that's
the
mower. Book, by the way, for anyone. Okay. But it's not in the movie.
This is a change. And as traumatic as what happened with our friendly sheriff was in the movie, this is worse. The book was worse. I'm like, and you're rooting for this poor young deputy, and you know it's going to end badly because there's so much book left. That you're like, this is not going to go well for this poor kid. And you see this poor kid. I just call him kid because Paul says he's young. He's a young law enforcement officer. And she gives him the 1-2. Like, this kid should be gone. And he gets up and is fighting for his life. And she takes him over to his noggin. And it's just like, no. How is this happening? And the detail in which he writes is just breathtaking, but not in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of writing that you're going to get in this. The detail, like I couldn't fault it in that area. But this does play out differently. I guess movie and TV friendly for the 1990s is how it's done. Because that I don't know. I could see it in like maybe a Jason or a Freddy movie. Where, because the way that he describes, there's splatter and all of that stuff. Yes, got some issues, is putting it mildly. So yeah, this is what you're going to get if you read the book versus if you've seen the movie. Just understand it is going to be so much more intense. And we're just saying what happened. Reading it is an experience. Not even kidding. Anybody else on changes?
I won't delve into it because for anybody who still wants surprises, it's kind of a big part of the ending. But whether the manuscript he's forced to write survives or not.
Yeah, that is a thing.
That was a change, and enjoy figuring out which one's which.
Read or watch to figure it out. Yeah, and there's a lot more that happens there's just more that happens in the book. So
yeah, we get more in his mind in the book, and where he has, like I was talking about before, the self-hatred, but yet the need to survive, and the trauma and everything and it's interesting, as we were talking about Kathy Bates's own mother, which probably played into her acting, maybe subconsciously, but there was gaslighting and everything of Kathy. Annie Wilkes ends up dropping something, and her response is usually, "Look what you made me do," before Taylor Swift made it a thing.
Yeah.
But it was never taking ownership.
Yeah, and there were times where she's directing all of this ire at Paul, and sometimes Paul is saying it in his mind, but towards the end, he's more vocalizing it and being like, "I don't care," because he's so at the end. Where earlier he'd keep it in his head because he doesn't know what she's going to do. So you're thinking, "I didn't do that, you did that," but you're keeping it to yourself because the person might harm you if you say something that you don't like. Or don't like. Yeah, they're very unpredictable. And even as you're watching, you feel watching it and reading it. You feel the unpredictability of it. Like even if he's quiet, is she gonna snap on him? If he says something, is she gonna snap? And then sometimes he says the most minute thing and she'll snap, and then he'll just be like blatant, and she's like, oh, like it's nothing, and you're just like, what? He just said that, and you're just like, oh, okay. And
Which is why he's so on edge, because he doesn't know what he can and cannot say. And that's consistent and stuff. Because I thought, like, for example, Richard brings up the typing paper and everything, which I thought was like a nice peek behind the writer thing of how the most expensive paper is actually poor quality because it smudges, and how there's other paper that's better, that was cheaper. And the way she blew up, even though he had a logical explanation and yes, ulterior motives too, but like I thought, oh, he's just using this as a ulterior motives. Then he actually demonstrated how easy it smudges, which also I want to know the drying time, because I think that all paper would smudge if you touch the ink immediately after it comes out. My 2 cents on that. However, him demonstrating it shows it that it wasn't just him trying to get her out of the house. And and then her taking that logic was like blowing up after that.
Yeah, very unpredictable.
Ben, speak up. Come on. What you got?
Like you said, I like that the book itself had a lot more detail-oriented moments. So there's a scene where he's trying to break out of his room, and so he happens to have done research from a police officer on how to pick a lock, and he happens to find a hairpin. And then in breaking out this is in the book, and in breaking out of the room, he breaks off a piece of the hairpin in the lock, and so that rattles around, and that's what ultimately gets him caught later on. But like the movie, it just sort of streamlined that, so I feel like we get less from both characters because she's not really figuring anything out. She just happens to see a bent hairpin, and it's like, oh, well, clearly he broke out. Like I feel like there's some moments in the movie where you need to have read the book to get a little bit more context as to what's happening, because it doesn't really show us everything that we needed to know.
Yeah, I agree with that, because the pen was something that even the reader wasn't privy to, like fully, like that would be something to be caught on to, especially when it falls out, and it apparently didn't. Whereas in the movie, it almost spoon fed us by having that close up of the glass penguin.
Yeah.
I was like, well, gee, thanks. Wasn't sure, didn't know that I was supposed to pay attention to that until you did that. And it just, that spoon feeding kind of, it put a bad taste in my mouth for a split second, but also I understand why they did it.
And it works to street, because you can only show so much in the movie, but like these were actual scenes. There was in the book, it's actual scenes, it's actual plot development. It shows incredible knowledge on both Paul's part and on Annie Wilkes's part for knowing, or for being aware and knowing to check like everything.
And also not showing all their cards to each other either. Like,
and in the book also, you get those details. You get the details of him like being paranoid. What if I left a track? What if something is scratched? What if something is moved? So you get his actual fear, and then realizing that it doesn't at this point, because you kind of like go through that when you're afraid of something. You're like, oh no, what if, and then you have to reconcile that it doesn't matter because this is the situation. So we're just, and so you can actually see him go through that process. And I also enjoyed that what we got with the detail over Annie's crimes, Annie's past crimes, where in the movie there's no way. So you get where he's like glancing over the papers. That you get that in the book, but in the book he's telling you, oh, and he's putting the pieces together like he's solving a mystery himself. So you're getting this story as well. You're getting
like a third story.
Yes. And I totally enjoyed going through that because at the time I hadn't rewatched it yet, but I'm like, oh yeah, that's what that was, and that's what that story was, because you're just getting newspaper clippings in the movie. So to get
like it's barely brushed over.
did.
Like she wasn't even married really in the movie. Like not in the. I think she does mention that her husband passed away, is what she says.
Yeah,
and that was it. Right. But yeah, no, I like the more backstory, more character development that the book had. But however, that comes with an asterisk of, if for anybody who's trying to choose between the two, if you can't handle physical horror, just go to the movie. I mean, it still has it, but it's not as extreme as the book. But
yeah, and I won't say what she did, but it's pretty bad. I think it's alluded to in one of the newspaper clippings, but oh my gosh.
Yeah, it is alluded to there.
And in the movie, it makes it seem like it all took place in one location for her backstory, for all the previous stuff. And whereas in the book, it's like, oh, she moved here, and then she moved further west, and then she moved further west, and then she moved further west. And like every time she got too much heat on her, she had to just pick up everything and leave. Because it was fun sort of unraveling the mystery of who Annie Wilkes actually is. And the movie goes very quick with that, but it doesn't. You're good.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Go ahead. Finish.
No, that was it. The movie just streamlines everything.
And I will say in the book that heightened the fear factor for me. Reading what she'd actually done, it just heightened the intensity. It heightened my concern for Paul. Heightened my sense of what is this woman capable of. So everything was heightened after being able to be with Paul as he's putting the pieces together, reading all of the stories from the newspaper clippings that she's collected and he's reading over. So everything in the book, everything just felt heightened. It was so intense. Were there calm moments? I don't think so, because even what would seem like a calm moment was wrought with, but what is she gonna do? Like it can't actually be calm because this seems insane. So there was no real relief. There were breathers, but even the breathers had that, but she could turn on him any second for anything. So that was really, really well done. I think that shortening it, what you had to do for the movie, kind of helped that along. That pacing helped to build that, because it just keeps building over the hour and 40 minutes that you're watching. But it's kind of drug out in the book, and it's these things like this that keep it heightened. Whenever there's even the cars coming down the road, every time there's a vehicle coming down the road, it's just like, if she's at home, you hear a vehicle, it's like, is someone going to die today? Because Annie, you know what I mean? Nobody can go. It's like every little thing is just like, what is she gonna do? You don't want anyone to come to the house, because you think, oh no, if they come to the house, they're going to die. This is bad. So it was just nonstop. It felt like nonstop. The relief was the misery stories. All right. Anybody else before we get ready to wrap this up?
Well, I can get ready with the final comments. I think there's 3 things that you can, as a writer, you can get from this story. 1, back up your work. All right. That's number 1 lesson. 2 is don't do drugs. Don't get addicted to alcohol.
Don't drive drunk.
Don't drive drunk. Like,
especially in a snowstorm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If the weather's bad, to just
stay home.
Extend your stay. It's fine. Okay. Just throwing that out there, that's another lesson. And then from a writing perspective, if the story as a whole, creating logical motives. Now, when I say logical, I don't mean we agree with it, but we can kind of see the warped thinking behind actions and methodology and such. And I think that this story does a very good job with that. But yeah, those are like the big, I think, takeaways for writers who are looking at this more than just a story.
Yeah. I'm gonna say I feel like this was definitely worth the read. I'm glad that I read it. Will I read it again? I don't know. There might be parts that I read for research purposes, actually, because there are things about how he did things, how he incorporated the misery stories, how he drew things out there. There are things that I think are interesting as far as storytelling goes, that I might read it again for that. But this is scarier than my tastes allow. I'm just gonna sit down and read it again for funsies. No, but it was good. I'm glad I read it. It was really good. Like I said, the book hit a like. The movie, I really liked it. I think I liked it even more the first time because I was kind of, I don't know if it was blown away the first time I saw it, but I was surprised. I think I was just surprised how much I liked it. And again, it put me on to Kathy. This is the first one that put me on to Kathy Bates. And I was like, I like her. This lady is really playing this part. And I'm believing
As my husband says, it's her second best performance. And I looked at him, I was like, what? And he goes, Fried Green Tomatoes is the first. I was like, okay, I'll allow that.
Yeah.
Which is probably one we should add to our list.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So those are my final thoughts. I'd say definitely worth a read and a watch if you're so inclined. How about you, Ben?
Yeah. I exactly what I said. I don't know if you need to do both of these, although they do. Reading the book and watching the movie definitely does enhance the experience. I feel like that is a lot of Stephen King to get through if he's hit or miss for you. That being said, individually, both these are fantastic pieces of work. The book was entertaining. It is very thrilling. It's very suspenseful, and same thing with the movie. So if you haven't yet, definitely give them both a watch or a read. And like, I think Natalie was the one who was saying it, where the audiobook version of it is fantastic.
Yes. Totally agree.
I'll cover the inspiration behind this. So,
okay.
Stephen King was inspired by, of course, a dream that he had while he was on a flight. And he grabbed a cocktail napkin and kind of wrote down just the main ideas that from this dream. I don't know exactly whether the dream was a scene or like the whole thing or such, but it also, what inspired him was a short story by Evelyn Waugh, W-A-U-G-H. Which is called, where was it? Which features a man being held captive, by a South American chief who is obsessed with Charles Dickens' works. And Stephen King wondered what it would be like if Dickens himself was the one that was held captive. As well as Stephen King wrote horror for a long time and then wrote The Eyes of the Dragon. And some fans were disappointed with that fantasy novel after all these horror novels, and they preferred his horror works. And some of the fan mail showed that. And
That's my favorite Stephen King novel.
Yeah, I bet you some of the fan mail might have been quoted verbatim with what was said in Misery. Just saying.
Yeah.
Then what else? Oh, and then also Stephen King has been known to have cocaine addiction, and so to him, Annie was also like a representation of the drug itself. And so there is multifaceted on the inspiration as well as the what is it called when the metaphor and such that everything represents here.
Oh, that's actually really interesting.
I love the internet.
No. Remember how we used to have to look things up? Oh my goodness.
Or you just had to argue with someone and they go, well, guess we'll never know. And you're like, yes,
Now
So fun fact, but I'm watching The Last of Us with my wife, and like every time we see a character, we're like pulling up IMDb, and she's just commenting about how in an apocalypse, how frustrating it will be to recognize someone and to not be able to do that.
When like you're arguing with people going no, and like no one can find the movies again. We don't, or maybe they did and they actually have a generator and they do like movie nights in the commune or something. But even then,
in the future, you wouldn't be able to know, whether they're right or not.
Yeah. Talking about different books and stuff, you wouldn't be able to look up. Squirrel moment, but you go to the library and you grab a book and you're like, oh, this book seems great, and then you find out it's like number 3 in the series, but you can't find 1 and 2. These are the like minor inconveniences of the apocalyptic world.
Yeah.
Besides surviving and stuff.
Yeah. Once you survive, then it's like, but the technology's all gone. But survive first. Yeah. So let's go on to what we are going to be.
What's next?
Reading and watching next. Yeah. I was looking for my banner. Can you tell when I'm trying to stall? I'm like, where is it? All right. So coming up, hopefully I've got these correct. August 17th, come join us. We're going to do Mary Poppins by P.L. Travers. And I'm looking forward to that one. It's going to be so much fun. And then in September, we're going to do variations of Taming of the Shrew. So what were we gonna watch today? We've got
for October.
Are we ready to announce October? I think
I'm ready. Are you ready, Ben? I mean, y'all liked my comments, so I'm assuming you're on board.
All right. So yeah, October we'll leave a little bit further even. We're gonna do some Frankenstein.
And what's great about Frankenstein, as when we did Dracula before and stuff, is that Frankenstein is one of those characters that has been like borrowed for multiple. And when I say Frankenstein, not just the doctor, but also Frankenstein's monster. We will be talking about that multiple times, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I mean, likewise with Taming of the Shrew, we're going to be doing, are we doing 10 Things I Hate About You?
Yep.
So, we already, whatever.
Are they starting to blend? Are they starting to blend?
Yeah.
You're probably thinking, what is the one that we did? Either one of the Jane Austen ones where we did Clueless or something like that, where it's in that same vein.
Yeah, which I enjoyed that one. Which is Emma, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in that vein, we'll be doing 10 Things I Hate About You, and we do Taming of the Shrew. And then I'm looking forward to October. That'll be a lot of fun to do Frankenstein. All right. I think that is all we have, guys. Let's go ahead and do our outros. We'll see you back in August. Mary Poppins, grab a copy, or if you have a copy, go ahead and read it. Check out the movie. I'm actually looking forward to watching the movie again. And like some of the music's some of my favorite from my childhood. So it'll be a lot.
I will have it stuck in my head.
I will too. Like there's a scene that's still one of my favorite scenes where they jump into the chalk drawing. I was actually, as a little kid, I remember I love Chim Chimney. We're gonna love
jumping into the sidewalk.
Into the sidewalk. Was anybody else as a child sad when the rain washed it away?
Yes.
I remember being a kid and being like really sad that got washed away. Anyway, we're gonna talk about Mary Poppins next month, so please join us. One of my favorites as a child, for sure. All right. So we will see you guys next time. Natalie, you want to let the folks know where you'll be at?
Writer Locke on Instagram and stay tuned. Just follow me on YouTube and Change Your Author on YouTube, and you'll see us when we live stream. And then I'm Natalie Locke on Twitch, which I'll live stream with our publisher, Zara Hoffman, on Inimitable Books sometimes then. But that's the short and sweet of it.
And I'm Ben Pick. You can find me at Running2Write. That's with the number 2 in the middle. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow at 6 p.m.
All right. And you're here on my channel. Follow me. I will be back to streaming productivity sprints, I believe, next week. So you can come hang out with me. Follow me on all of the things. Yeah. Let's, he says, huzzah. Thank you, Richard. And we shall see you guys next time. We're going to say goodbye with a little Loki. Bye.